Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. The geopolitics of tourism. So I have three esteemed panelists here. Mehmet, Kutman, my good friend Manfredi, Lefebvre, and Khalid, Al-Rumaihi. And we are going to delve into some things that two of my colleagues I know are thinking are very challenging to talk about. But luckily, they're all holistic people. And they've all done very holistic things, which is really what tourism is all about. And so we'll start with the first question, which is geopolitical tensions are clearly impacting tourism. So you can see it in share prices in companies with what's going on right now. But more importantly than that, the question is, how does it impact the communities that depend on tourism? How does it impact actual travel, not just to destinations involved in tension, but the global ripple effect from having those tensions in the world? And what can management do, what kind of management practices that government policymakers could help put in to help insulate destinations and to try to maintain secure, seamless travel experiences and volatility. So I dragged the question out on purpose to give them plenty of time to think about their answers, and I'll let whoever wants to go first, go first.
I'll start. First of all, good afternoon. It's delightful to be here in Riyadh at FII. It's a loaded question, so
of course
let me tackle some parts of it. And maybe I know the gentlemen are going to speak about it from an industry perspective. I'll speak about it from a policy perspective. So I think that tourism is becoming an important industry in the Middle East. It's a high employer, and you know all the governments in the Middle East are looking to create jobs. It's becoming a significant contributor to the GDP. Most countries are looking at double-digit sizes for tourism as a percentage of their economy. Saudi Arabia has announced that it wants 10% of its GDP to come from tourism. In the Kingdom of Bahrain, we have about 6% of our GDP. It was much less than that a couple of years ago. We want to grow that to 10%. I've always said that FDI starts with somebody coming to visit your country as a tourist. They come, they see the country, they have to like that country, and then you're going to see that gentleman or lady bring an investment to that country. How can governments insulate against what's happening in the world? I think, listen, COVID is an illustration of how governments, and I think this region was exemplary in how it dealt with COVID. Governments, to the extent possible, knew how to support the private sector quickly. In Bahrain, there was support, even to the extent of providing salaries to locals to make sure that they were not released by those firms who had to shut down. There was an openness. Travel in most countries was, in Bahrain at least, it was open, there was never a shutdown. And I think more importantly, the incentives. There were soft loans given to those corporates to allow them to weather that storm. Why? Because of the importance of that sector. And I think going forward, the way that you insulate it is you're going to have a long-term view. I mean, this region is quite familiar with shocks. We've had a shock pretty much every 3 or 4 years. I chair a real estate developer. You've got to take a long-term view. If you're going to build a hotel or a resort, you have to think about it in decades, not in 1 or 2 year timeframes. So I think governments have to adopt long-term policies that encourage investment, ensure there's talent available, ensure there's an openness to the country, accessibility, ensure that the visa issuance is quick and smooth. And I think the Gulf and the Middle East is leading the world in that regard at the moment.
Excellent.
From my point of view, the geopolitics, not differently from all the kind of events which disturbed travel and tourism, affected from like a leopard skin. So you'll have, depending on what's going on, maybe a certain sector or certain country or certain area will be affected or not. We've seen so many. All the time it's a different area which is affected. During COVID, tourism in the United States boomed. within United States. Other countries suffered because United States provides 40% of the world travelers. But the countries which benefited were the countries where the United States citizens felt more comfortable, so within their world. When there was the Ukraine war, we were all concerned. Travel boom continued. And this is because there is a fundamental need of the people to experience different worlds, travel, not be stuck only in one country, meet other people, and so on. And what happens is that it slows down and maybe it directs in a certain direction and then again another direction. So from a Middle East point of view, clearly, as today, the geopolitics affect nearby countries, there can be more sensitivity. There is a general sensitivity. We all see bookings slowing down, but it's more towards countries which are close by, if not directly involved. So that's my point of view. It usually doesn't last long, but it can affect for some time quite meaningfully.
Mehmet.
I think, looking specifically to the cruise industry, those are floating assets. If something is bad in the Middle East, they move to West Med. If it's bad in the West Med, they move to the Americas, basically. So as far as the industry is concerned, save for a black swan event like the pandemic, which I do believe governments around the world, with some few exceptions, did really not the right thing. Shutting down the whole economy was a huge mistake. Shutting down the cruise industry was a huge mistake. The cruise industry will not get affected too much from the geopolitical situation, especially in the Middle East. We as global ports are so diversified. We have, I think we're in 18 countries with 30 ports. So if we don't catch the these ships in the East Med, we catch them in the Caribbean. That's one thing important. But the most important thing, especially after COVID, we were the first port in Malta who opened. So collaboration with the governments and taking the necessary measures in order to facilitate the cruise tourism, which is very relevant for some small islands, is a critical point. And on the security front, in some countries there's seamless process, especially for cruise ships. You know, they show their cruise card and go. We, for example, in Antigua, we moved that from the airport straight to the ship. They don't have access to anything. So those some small minor changes, I think, will be more than enough. Ships will move. You know, political tension in the Middle East, they'll move there. And also, what's important is the perception and the perspective of each crisis. That's very, very important, and how it's handled.
So, you know, taking a long-term view, diversification of destinations, location, offerings, all that, from a business standpoint. From a policy-making standpoint, you mentioned you thought that maybe some governments didn't take the right position during COVID. But as you look more broadly at it, and not just COVID-specific, what kind of general attributes did you see that really did work? So I'll throw one out as a, for example, harmonization, you know, where you mentioned the Middle East, but Bahrain was the only country that did in the Middle East, and everybody else shut down. It would be very difficult to have flow. So harmonization is one example, but are there other examples you think we should offer up to policymakers as ways to, you know, get through crises and tough situations? Yeah.
You know, every crisis is going to be different.
Right.
I mean, we talk about a health crisis like the pandemic. There are certain, and listen, I mean, I was in government at the time. It's easy today to sit and talk about let's stay open. It took courage from policymakers to say, I am going to ensure there's a public policy, there's a system that allows people to get vaccinated, that allows people that get vaccinated to feel comfortable going out in the public. You know, so there are dynamics and realities around every situation that have to be taken into account. So a health pandemic will be different than a geopolitical war. But I think, again, stepping back, what do governments need to do? I think governments need to ensure they create an environment that makes investment feel safe. They need to make sure that they are allowing investors to feel comfortable even in high stress situations. So protecting that investment, ensuring that employment practices are, and in times where there is a issue where you have to look at employment and perhaps assisting with that employment, that's when you step in. And we saw that in several occasions in the country. But I look at three things that, and the most important of them is three things that you need to do as a public policy for tourism. You have to create awareness. You have to create a destination that customers or tourists will come to. We've seen examples of that holding these major events. Dubai did Dubai Expo. Qatar hosted the World Cup. You start to bring tourists in, and then eventually they come back again. The second is accessibility. How easy is it for you to enter the country? Again, the infrastructure. I mean, I look at my experience when I travel. How do I feel? I mean, the way I go through that airport, the type of airline I flew in to get to that country, my experience at that airport, getting my luggage, etc., shapes my first impression. So that accessibility. And the third is creating these, whether it's hotels or restaurants or venues, and being having some customization for the country. I mean, in Bahrain, we're proud that when you come to Bahrain, it's got to make you feel, it's got to feel authentic. It's got to feel that you have some connection with the country. I want to be able to interact with that country. So I think that applies whether you're in a geopolitical situation or not. It's good practice, and governments just have to be able to stay persistent in implementing these initiatives.
Excellent. So, Manfredi, you've been a long-time member of World Travel and Tourism Council, a serial investor in cruise lines. You have Abercrombie and Kent, with lodges and experiences throughout the world. You've been all over the world in terms of your investments. So as you hear what he's saying, what have been some of the challenges you've seen in trying to help governments create the right private-public partnerships to generate that environment for investing in sustainable investing? And what are some...
In reality, when you have a crisis, governments forget their good policies and they start coming like forts which are surrounded by enemies. Right. So everybody becomes an enemy within Europe. Yeah. European Union, you had all sorts of divisions and people could not travel. And then you start saying, remember the pandemic, negotiations which vaccines we should buy. The French imposed their own. And then they were not good. So it becomes, policies become the worst enemies of the economy, many times. So in reality, we should have policies which look for the good being of the people and of the economy, which is fundamental. Very difficult, because then you have a lot of instances of selfishness. We were going towards a world of globalization, and with the COVID crisis, it became a world of nationalization. So it's the opposite of what we were working on. And today, I don't know where we're going again. With all of these crises, we have that risk that besides the kind of restrictions linked to health, we will have a more linked to politics. People from Europe cannot travel there. People from there cannot travel to Europe and things like this. Very detrimental. I don't know how you stop this.
You have any ideas?
We have a saying back in Turkey, engel olma başka yar istemez. Don't stop me, don't put a hurdle in front of me, we don't want anything else. That's what we say about the government in Turkey. So I think governments in general and private initiatives, private sector, the COVID era, pandemic era, a lot of countries, starting with the United States of America, did terrible mistakes. Unfortunately, and that affected the whole world. As a result, most of us look to US for something to do and things like that. But going forward, I think a central coordination for pandemic is crucial. Central coordination for security also is critical, absolutely critical, whether it's the cruise industry or air travel or hotel. I'm all for, especially having listened to this A1, every single world citizen to have a single card with a single digit number. We get all registered. I have absolutely no problem for security reasons or even tax reasons. That's another story, but it's perfectly fine. This way, people can follow. And the technology is there to have that. Right. Worldwide, it's there.
So at WTTC, we just released a report today. We had a press conference with His Excellency Al-Khatib released an environmental impact study. It's the first of its kind that's been done. It's not just environmental, actually. It's economic and environmental impact. 185 countries, Oxford research, so verifiable research, showing the impact of travel and tourism, and the impact both on the environment as well as on economies, with some ideas of areas of focus where we're going to track every year to make sure we're making improvements. So when you look at the conversation we just had, you led in a little bit with technology. The session before us was AI. I do want to point out they dressed a little differently than us, but other than that, I think we're on the same page. The question is, how do you see the combination of technology, sharing data, and people realizing the ultimate impact of travel and tourism, like you see here in Saudi? I mean, $800 billion being invested in their tourism economy overall, and they're going the opposite direction where a lot of the world's going. It's very open. 2019 was the first time, and it's so open and so proactive in terms of realizing the economic multiplier effect, the quality of life, and bringing cultures and different people together so that we learn what we have in common so we can celebrate our differences rather than fear them. So look at that, think about technology, and just give me your thoughts on all that in terms of how we can make tourism better globally.
Yeah, but, technology can be a great opportunity to, for example, when people travel, to get all the information about them, process more rapid, etc. But we also have learned that technology cannot replace human judgment, because the recent facts have proven that the best technology does not protect anybody. Right. You need to have intelligence applied using the tools of technology. Mm-hmm. Of course, the tools are going to be, the possibility with artificial intelligence or gigantic. Mm-hmm. You can have the life of anybody processed in a second. Right. And so, and all of these things are very useful. But still, we need to have a balance between the tool of the technology and the final judgment and implementation.
I mean, I think, I agree. I think you can't replace, the hospitality industry is about human contact.
Exactly.
So I think I don't see technology replacing that. Mm-hmm. Whether it is in a restaurant or in a hotel, I'm executive chairman of a group that is in hotel and hospitality, and when I visit or the human contact is, I want to know what the chef prepared. I want to know that there's some of his history, his background in that. The same thing will happen in a hotel, the receptionist. But where technology is leading is disintermediating with the customer. Booking.com, Expedia, they're owning that customer.
Right.
And you're, as a hotel, you're basically the person providing that asset. Much like we see probably in the airline industry. And that disintermediation means you're not owning the customer as much as you did in the past. Mm-hmm. And what the industry has to find is ways to, again, be technology savvy. Just like I can go on an app, Booking.com, find the best hotel, the best rate. The hotel industry has to adapt to that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're just a commodity provider. So I think we're going to see more technology.
And what types of adaptations do you see the hotel industry?
I think you've got to make it as easy for you to book on that hotel, and to be, to have perhaps an app. And if you're, Intercontinental, or you're the Four Seasons, and you have these multiple chains, I should be able to have seamless interaction across those hotels. You should make it as convenient as an app does for me to get that rate, and make it special for me to build a customer relationship where I start to share my data with you, and then you own that customer more than you did before, because technology allows you to gather much more information about that customer. So I think they have to embrace it. I see the hotel industry doing that. I think the F&B industry has to do that. And I think technology can be it can empower your relationship with the customer. But if you're not careful, it can disintermediate you with the customer.
Now you've taken an approach with your group in terms of how you would like your guests to experience. What you offer, why don't you share that with, in terms of
Well, I mean, we're early in our technology journey, but I am beginning to think about how I use technology in my restaurants to start to collect data about, with their permission, of course, because you have to be careful,
Right.
but about what they like, about what's, like, if you go to a restaurant now, you'll find out what's popular by asking the waiter.
Right.
What if through an app, you would find out what's the best-selling item? What if I could offer you information in that restaurant that would educate you, and we're used to that now. We're used to technology. And if we can, and we're beginning to think along these lines, if I can do that, I'm both collecting data from that customer, but also sharing that data with the rest of the customers. So in that sense, I'm now interacting with that restaurant guest in a way that I never did before. I never would have known, I would have known their name,
Right.
I'd have known what table they like,
Right.
but now I know what they want to eat, how often they eat, and I can build a better relationship with that customer than I did in the past. So that's just an example of how we're thinking about it.
Excellent. Mehmet?
I think, like His Excellency said, you cannot lose the human touch in tourism. That's very, very critical. Just to give you an exact idea, I've been going to the same hotel in London for 40 years. It's good to see people who've been there for 40 years.
Yeah.
If I didn't see them, I wouldn't go. I have my specific room for 40 years, I stayed there. So those are important small touches. Yes, granted, technology will help on security, data collection, as His Excellency said, which table, what food, the name of that person. We have such things. We have something called Cruise Genie, which we do all those things. But again, the human touch probably is the least relevant thing in our business as port operator. Whereas in the cruise industry, I think the human touch, I mean, you know better than anyone probably, is very critical. So, technology is like this cane. It helps you walk. That's it, nothing more.
But going, governments and technology, I don't know why we still have those terrible process when you have to go immigration in a country. With technology, it should be so much easy to prepare in advance. You're landing, all the data is there, then immediately facial recognition, and you're done. And it still goes, and complications, and for the cruise industry, it's terrible.
I know.
When
I
the
have
process
to have
of
3-4 passports, so I don't wait through the lines.
so it's there's so many things can be done by government with the help of technology to improve the quality of the people traveling around. Not only when you arrive in a hotel, but when you arrive in a country.
Absolutely. Agreed.
If you can do it in your hotel, why can't they do it in the country?
It's a bigger problem. There's a lot more stakeholders, believe me, I know it.
Same thing.
It's simpler in business than it is in government, let me tell you.
Thing. It's processing data. It's not knowing what you chose, what you ate, what you did in your life. Everything is there. You can have all the flights you took.
In business, you're going to have a bottom line, very clear.
Yes.
You're focused on that bottom line.
No, in
It's black and white. In government, I speak, there's so many facets and we can't dismiss them. You have to think about
This is not the businessman talking.
that's my other hat.
That's the public officer.
But it's the tension that exists, and that's the thing that's relevant. So go ahead.
Yeah.
What was?
No, I was going to say that that balancing is there's no clear bottom line. I mean, yes, it's easy for us to say, let's have an app and allow that person to enter. But there are other elements that you have to consider. One of which we talk about geopolitics. I mean, you're allowing people to come into your country. You want to know more about them. You want to understand the security situation. So, I mean, you have to also understand and respect those elements. But can it be improved? Yes, 100%. I agree.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, can
I'm
it
saying
be
that you don't
improved?
want to
Of
know
course.
who's going to come in the country.
Yeah.
But with all how fast it is process data, and you can collect with most means of transportation, you can collect that data in advance. Of course, if somebody arrives driving his car, okay, you don't have the data in advance. But anything from a cruise line to an airline, you have the data in advance. And sure, it should be possible to achieve the goals, which are, of course, we understand, which are public safety, should be achieved much better.
But I'll ask you this. I was talking to a gentleman with me who was traveling to Saudi. He said he applied for his visa online. He got his visa in 10 minutes to come to this conference. Can we do the same? Can we say the same about going to the U.S.? I don't think I'll get my visa in 10 minutes if I go to the U.S. So I mean,
Right.
the governments here are becoming pretty agile.
No, here they're agile.
becoming very fast. They are using technology.
Yeah, they're agile.
Why do-
The process
so-
in the Middle East is excellent.
don't compare yourself with the worst immigration in the world, which is the U.S., which is a frightening experience.
Okay, so we have 5 minutes left. So looking ahead over the next 5 years, give me your forecast on what's going to happen with tourism and what will be the key developments and what it's going to look like.
I'm going to let you guys go first. Yeah.
There you go.
5 years, Ukraine-Russia confrontation endemic.
Say again.
Ukraine-Russia confrontation endemic. So like a standstill or a war which doesn't move anything. And doesn't affect travel and tourism at all. The Middle East is, of course, a question mark that nobody knows how to resolve. And but hopefully, this acute phase goes down again and become again a situation which doesn't affect the global economy and the global society. It is, I understand, for the people of this region, very important. But for the rest of the world, it's a local problem again, hopefully. And travel and tourism is the most growing consumption. People don't care about clothes, people don't care about this, that. It's about dining, interacting with people, traveling. So it's our industry, which is the biggest growing one.
Excellent.
In the cruise industry especially, we did a long study, 20, 30 years, even starting with Carnival. I think it's the most resilient industry. I don't know oil and gas, frankly, but the most resilient industry. Wherever there's an economic crisis, it takes them 2 to 3 months to pick up immediately. So the cruise industry is okay. Russia, Ukraine, certainly I agree with Manfredi. It's going to be an endemic going on. Hopefully things in the Middle East is not going to, it's going to calm down, let's say. I hope so. But overall, if you look at it, one industry which really will grow faster, tech excluded, will be tourism worldwide. And Saudi Arabia is a good example of that, for example. I just walk through, then I see Red Sea something there, something there. So these are new destinations. People are fed up to see time after time a Barcelona, a Madrid, a Rome, in the Caribbean. So I think, going forward, next 5 to 10 years, this region especially, assuming it gets calmer, peaceful, will attract a lot of world tourism. Their market share will improve drastically.
Absolutely. Khalid?
So I'm going to be an optimist about the region because I believe in the region. We had 48 million tourists, inbound tourists into the Gulf in 2022. I think we'll double that.
Yeah.
I think we'll hit 100 million in inbound tourism in the Gulf. I think we will see the GDP contributions well exceed the 10%. I think that it will approximate 15% plus. In Bahrain, oil is now 16, 17%. So when you can see tourism at 15%,
Right.
you're talking about a major contributor. I think we will see tourist flows. We rely on probably more tourist flows west to east. I think we'll see the flip side of that. I think we're seeing wealth in India, in Vietnam. I think we're going to see much more tourism flows, and I'm talking about this region coming from the east. I think we'll still have Western flows, but I think we will have a tilting to where we will have more tourists from China, Vietnam, India, and so forth. And they'll come not just for business. They'll come to spend vacations, and I'm an optimist about that in the next 5 years.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you guys very much. My forecast is we're going to see a lot more frictionless travel. It's going to become easier to travel because of technology, because of harmonization, because of the effort of all the people here and all of you in the industry to help governments realize what an engine for change and an engine for multiplier effect economic growth tourism is. And I thank you all very much for this panel, and we look forward to seeing you for the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you to everybody.